right. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Ink, the talk show that takes you behind the book to meet the authors and professionals in the indie publishing industry. We are back with another episode. My co-host David, how you doing this week?
Hi, I'm good. I just saw Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Really awesome movie.
I am so jealous. I can't even tell you. So absolutely jealous of you right now.
It was a purple carpet event. That was so crazy.
I saw the pictures and it was huge too. Oh my goodness.
It was a crazy big event, like especially compared to the first movie, but you're gonna love it. Everybody's gonna love it. So much fun.
2 weeks and counting. All right, but this week we've got another author to introduce you to, and she's actually not indie published. She is traditionally published, and she's got a brand new book out. KJ, go ahead and introduce yourself to us.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm KJ Howe, and I've written the book called The Freedom Broker. And for the last 3 years, I've been researching kidnap and ransom intensively. And my character, Thea Paris, is an elite kidnap negotiator who travels to the globe's hotspots to bring hostages home. So it's been a fascinating journey, and I'm delighted to talk more about it.
Wow, kidnapping. Now, what got you into that specific realm of the thriller genre?
Well, growing up, I lived internationally. My father worked in telecommunications. So we lived in Africa, Saudi Arabia, all over the world. And I always had this sort of overarching feeling of danger being there because, we were living in some interesting and dangerous places. And so kidnapping really called to me, and I knew I wanted to write an international thriller. So it was a great fit to be able to pair, a character who travels all over the globe to try and help hostages.
Now, what kind of research goes into learning about hostage negotiation and what goes on behind the scenes in this type of environment?
Well, I've interviewed many people, including elite kidnap negotiators, probably only about 25 to 30 of them in the world, actually, that do this job. And so I've been able to, befriend and get to know a few of them and learn exactly what it is they do. I've also spoken to former hostages, including Peter Moore, who was the longest held hostage in Iraq for almost 1,000 days. And that was a really, privilege to be able to talk to him. We become good friends. And I've also talked to people in the kidnap and ransom insurance industry, which is fascinating, as well as special forces soldiers who deliver ransoms and execute the rescues. So basically, I've just immersed myself in that world. And I've also done some combat training so that I, am comfortable with the type of dynamic and active lifestyle that my character lives.
So in dealing with these kidnappings, what type of tactics does your character employ? Like, I know there's negotiating, obviously, but does she ever tactfully dress up and infiltrate these places, get to know the people who are selling these people off? Does she ever play both sides, you know what I mean? Like go undercover?
Absolutely. And she's also very tactically trained. In fact, the Freedom Broker opens with the hostage rescue scene where my character, Thea Paris, basically goes into Nigeria, into the Delta swamp, and rescues a hostage because the negotiations had broken down and there was basically no hope for this gentleman unless it was rescued.
Oh, that is really cool. I really like that.
There's a technical term for that too, and I can't think of it right off the top of my head.
I think it's in media res, is that right? Or
yes, that's
the action.
Exactly it. Start in the middle, and that's a lot of writing courses will tell you to do that. You start at the highest point of action to really capture your reader's interest and draw them in, and then you kind of ebb and flow a little bit as the plot goes along.
I couldn't agree more. I think, it's like the feedback I've been receiving is that the book's very fast-paced, which I'm thrilled about because I really enjoy a fast-paced book and, that's something that gets your adrenaline flowing. But as well, I think you really need to give the reader a chance to breathe, sort of a scene sequel setup. And so it was a lot of fun to write, and I'm actually busy finishing the second book in the series, Skyjack, right now.
Awesome. Now, speaking of writing, how long did it take you to write that novel?
About 1.5 years, but I've been, working on my writing for many years now. I'm a former medical writer, and so switching from, basically a nonfiction environment to a fiction one was really quite a change. In nonfiction, you kind of describe things and sort of tell things, whereas in fiction, you dramatize and you create a world for the readers to, basically feel like they're right in the middle of a movie.
Absolutely. And the better you describe it and the better you add, that immersion for the reader, the more they're going to enjoy it. Now, the reason I brought up the how long did it take, I read an article this morning that talked about indie authors right now are very pressured to produce, when traditionally published usually goes a year between sequels when it comes to an author that's putting out work. Now, obviously, the two different marketplaces have reasons for why they do that. Do you feel any pressure now that you've got that first book out to really get the second one going? Is your publisher putting that added pressure on you as well?
Well, we've set up a schedule, as you said, to have a book a year. So it's nice because I also have another full-time job. So, to be able to write that, but definitely I think the indie writer is under a lot of pressure, and because, basically the fans that love their books and they want the next one right away. The traditionally published, system sets it up that books only come out every year, and they do a lot of prep work and a lot of editorial work, for example, cover art and marketing prep, and so that system seems to work for them. But it does seem like a long time to wait between books when in the indie world you can produce it so quickly. I kind of think it's a great concept to be able to, put out maybe even 2 or 3 books a year.
And that's a relatively easy to do pace, 2 or 3 books a year. When you're just talking about writing novel length books, getting the word count in isn't actually the hard part. It's the editing, the revising, all of that backup stuff, like you said, the publisher does, that really takes the time. The writing part is the fastest part.
Yeah, exactly. And in my case, it's a bit different because I've done such intensive research. And if you read The Freedom Broker, I'm hoping that you will be entertained, but also educated. And you'll put the book down and feel like, hey, you know what? I learned a lot about the kidnapping world, about international intrigue and travel safety. So that's one of the things I'm really interested in doing. And my character has type 1 diabetes. And I did that because my background with medical writing, and my grandfather had diabetes. And I felt strongly that it would be really nice to have a character with a serious illness, but not let it hold her back from living a very tactical and active lifestyle.
How does that impact her line of work? Like, what extra precautions does she need to take to maintain her body on these, they're very stressful situations. Yeah. How does she manage all of that?
Well, it's really about planning. If you have diabetes and she's type 1, so she's insulin dependent. She wears a pump, so when she's out in the world, she doesn't have to stop. But she also carries a lot of backup medical supplies with her, because some of the countries she travels into, they don't have readily available insulin. It's really an interesting part of the book takes place in Zimbabwe, and to be stranded in a situation, insulin also needs to be kept cool. So there's another complication there. So she has to plan her meals carefully to make sure she eats regularly. And as well, she has to make sure that when she travels through different time zones, you have to make sure you're getting the right insulin dose. And it's a very complicated process. So it's really important for her to plan ahead.
That is so crazy. Like, you could have easily just gone ahead and made this woman just like near invincible. She sounds extremely intelligent to begin with, and to give her those added obstacles, it sounds like you really did put a lot of effort into this, into telling this story. That is so cool.
Well, thank you kindly. I just feel like, it's like that old adage from writing, put your character up in a tree and then start throwing rocks at them and then throw heavier rocks. And, it just makes things more difficult. And I think in a thriller situation, having someone that has a basically ticking time bomb inside of them, if they don't get the insulin, they're not going to make it, really creates a lot of extra tension.
Yeah, no kidding. And so now she's traveling all over the world, right? Like, throughout this story?
Yeah, absolutely. In this particular first book, she travels to Santorini, Greece, Athens, Greece, and Zimbabwe. And in future books, she'll be traveling all sorts of places like Libya, Italy. Basically, it's a very, very international backdrop.
That's so cool. And your cover art, I'm looking at your cover art right here. Right. Now, have this, it looks like a yacht on fire, and superimposed against the ocean background, and then the radar and the whole globe. I love it. It all comes together really well. So do we actually
look up the UK cover for it as well? That one's gorgeous too.
I love the UK cover as well. I think it's really neat with that woman running, and yeah, they're both great. I was very, very lucky. I just got my Polish cover recently as well, and it's really beautiful.
Now, what is the reason for the different covers for the different markets?
Well, I've learned a lot during this process, and the American and Canadian, North American, I should say. I'm based in Toronto, but of course work a lot in New York. And the American market is so incredibly different. They're attracted to different covers and different designs, whereas the UK market has very specific things they like. And they're a lot kind of calmer covers in a way, and sometimes simpler and less ornate. And I think it's really interesting because, for my UK publishers, they've talked to me a lot about what goes behind the cover design and their thinking. And it's dramatically different than the US.
Now, can we talk just a little bit about the traditional publishing side? And you just touched on something about having a UK publisher, a US a publisher that's doing different versions. How does that work for you? Do you actually have a contract with each different publisher from each different country?
Absolutely, yes. My agent really basically, actually, ironically, I sold in 10 days to the UK first. And the UK editor, I'm under the Hachette umbrella, and so Headline in the UK and Quercus in the US. And so the Headline editor called the US one and said, I love this book, would you like to do it together with me? And so it's been really interesting because it's kind of nice in a way that I'm under the same umbrella for both companies. So there's a lot of coordination. It could have happened very differently though. It could have been like, I could have been with like a Random House, in the US and Hachette in the UK. That's quite possible as well. So it's really important to, your agent coordinates it all for you and make sure that communication lines are open.
Now that's a question that brings up another question that a lot of people ask as far as when they decide to go publishing traditional or indie. The agent is really that key player if you're going to go to the traditional marketplace. How do you go about finding the right agent and attracting the right agent for your story? How did that work for you?
Well, it's a great question. And what I love about that question is that every single author will have a totally different answer. In my case, I was incredibly lucky. I went to Hawaii to study at a retreat, and Karen Slaughter was my instructor. And I absolutely love her books. She's an extremely talented author. And I was working actually on another book about a female sniper, but I decided to go in the kidnap direction. And during that process, Karen had kind of pulled me aside and said, I think my agent might like, your writing, and also the fact that you're writing about a strong female protagonist. Would it be okay if I, connected you guys? And I said, sure. And I only had 50 pages of The Freedom Broker done, but I had finished another novel about the female sniper. And so I was going to wait till I was finished Freedom Broker because I felt like the first novel I wrote was, opportunity to learn. There was some structural issues there. I felt like, it just wasn't ready for publication. And anyway, so when Karen's, agent, now my agent, Victoria Sanders, reached out to me and said, please just send me whatever you have. So I did. I sent her the full novel and then the 50 pages. And I was extremely lucky because she signed me on that.
Congratulations. That is so cool.
Yeah, I feel very lucky. And, and just, like because I'm the executive director of Thrillerfest, we have an event called Pitch Fest just to tell people that are looking for agents. We have 60 agents come because we're based in New York. And if you're looking for an agent, it's a wonderful place to find one. And basically we have it set up that it's sort of speed dating for authors. And you get to line up and pitch to at least 10 or 12 agents at once in the afternoon. And it's just a phenomenal opportunity to connect. And we have a lot of success stories on our website at thrillerfest.com. So just in case someone's looking, we always want to help. That's our mantra.
That's an amazing idea, Pitch Fest. So it's you sit down with a agent and you give your log line. How does that work?
Yeah, you have, about 3 to 5 minutes to basically sit down, and we actually train all of our attendees how to pitch properly and how to make an interactive process, which I think is incredibly important. I really want to stress to, aspiring authors that it's really important the fit is there, because that person's going to be representing you out there, and also you're hiring them. So you need to make sure that you really feel connected to them. For example, when I first spoke to Victoria Sanders, I felt an immediate connection with her. And, we spoke the same language. I felt like she was strong and intelligent, and I really felt good about her representing me. And I think Pitch Fest offers that face-to-face contact that you really can't replicate anywhere else. It's not like you're sending a query letter online to someone and, you know, hoping to hear back, but you don't even know what they look like or feel like, and this just gives you that face-to-face contact.
That's
Absolutely.
an opportunity. I really like that idea. And you said it happens out in New York?
Yeah, at Thrillerfest, every July, we host it at the Grand Hyatt in Manhattan, and it's a fantastic conference, super fun. We're honoring Lee Child this year as our Lifetime Achievement Award, and we're also having Lisa Gardner come for our Silver Bullet Award, which is a charitable award. So, you know, it's a great place to network if you like mysteries or thrillers or anything in that genre. And we mean that very inclusively because we have a lot of YA authors who write thrilling novels. We have science fiction thriller writers. So just know that it doesn't mean you have to write a thriller like a classic thriller.
And how long has that event existed?
It's in its 12th year now.
Wow, that's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how did you get involved with the process of being on the association?
Well, I actually went to the very first Thrillerfest and I volunteered, and I just, you know, loved working with the people. And then I was asked to take over Pitch Fest, and that was my first, you know, kind of real large volunteer job. And after that, I was asked to take on the role of executive director. So I jumped at it because the International Thriller Writers, which is the umbrella organization that organizes Thrillerfest, is really a very special, you know, group of people that really care, extremely collegial, and incredibly supportive. And I can't tell you how nice it's been to be part of that organization over the last, you know, 8 or 9 years.
I'll definitely have to check them out. We'll also put the website link for them as well underneath.
Lovely.
That way our viewers can find everything that we're talking about during this show without having to go search the internet for it. Back to the question I'd asked you before.
Sure.
So we're talking about the process. You've got your agent now. You've got, you said, about 50 pages written into that story. What happened next once your agent said, I like it, I want to sell it? Where did it go from there?
Sure. Well, I obviously needed to finish the book, and I actually did a lot of editorial work on the book. But the one thing I can stress, you know, to aspiring authors is it's really worth taking your time and getting the book right, because I think the best way you can build a career is to try and write the strongest book you can at that moment. Now, I know that, like, even now I'll look back at the Freedom Broker and say, oh, I'd love to change this or that, because we grow as writers with every time we write. But at the same time, you need to let go of the book at one point or another. And so basically I went through and did a lot of editorial work, tried to whip it into shape. And then my agent went out to a lot of US and UK editors, and she started with the big 5. And I was, like I mentioned earlier, I was extremely lucky to sell it in 10 days to a UK editor, and, you know, at Headline. And it was just fantastic opportunity. And then the US came into play, and then as well as Canada, and then some international sales.
And one very important skill as a writer to learn is to, you know, to be patient with your work and work it until it makes, you know, until it's the best that it can possibly be. And I think that that's something that each writer has to learn to do on their own, because you get really attached to your work as you work on it, you know. And for you to recognize, you know, you were talking about your sniper novel.
Yes.
You set that aside and then you worked on the Freedom Broker instead. That's so key, I think, to your success, is that you recognized what you needed to prioritize.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I guess the best advice I would ever give to writers is to embrace criticism from credible sources. Now, I mean that in the sense that, you know, I've had some really talented people look at my work and give me some phenomenal feedback, and that's been the best gift I've ever been given as a writer. And I think it's really important to be open to that. You also have to be careful, because you never want to lose your essence or your storytelling ability, because with every single book, you're the only person who can really write that book, and that's what makes it special. You know, your background, your, you know, influences. I think that really it's key to realize that it's still your novel, and if something someone tells you doesn't resonate, try to make sure that you look at it carefully before you adopt their criticism. At the same time, I think you need to be very open to criticism so you can grow and learn as a writer. And I can see, you know, I've really improved my writing, and I'm absolutely committed to keeping, working on my prose and my storytelling ability, and to try to, make the next book stronger.
So now, who do you work with, I would say, most frequently, like on your working drafts? Like, do you constantly send it to your agent? Do you send it, like, do you have beta readers who work with you that you trust to help you build up that really nice manuscript? How do you go from, concept to final book?
Sure, I definitely have a couple people I know and trust to bounce ideas around. I also have, because I'm very technical and I have a lot of research involved, I often ask my experts to read it and give me some feedback as well. For example, in Skyjack, I have a couple of aviation experts that are helping me. And so I go to them for that aspect to make sure I get all the technical details correct. I'm also really lucky. The reason I wanted to write novels was because I read The Brotherhood of the Rose by David Morrell. He's the creator of Rambo. And David is an amazing man, extremely talented writer, and a very gifted teacher. And I had an opportunity to write a feature article on David several years ago. And after writing it, he asked if he could please use it on his website. And of course, I agreed immediately. And he said that he really enjoyed the in-depth, way I approached the article. And could he help me? And so David has actually been instrumental in giving me some incredible feedback and advice. And it really doesn't get any better than having Rambo's daddy, give you some feedback.
No kidding. Oh my gosh. That is so crazy. And it looks like, just the last, 20 some odd minutes that we've been speaking, I can tell that, you dig deep into your research. And I find it one of the most fascinating aspects of creating, anything is the research. Like when I was doing my book, we actually visited, because I feature Stonehenge in the book. I wanted to see Stonehenge, so we actually got to visit that. And that was amazing. And I feel like if you take the time to make those details authentic, they will become, more authentic when presented to the reader. And I can already tell, like with The Freedom Broker, everything that you have delivered in this book will come as 100% authentic. That is so cool.
Yeah, thank you. I just really believe in trying to get the facts right. We're all human, we can make mistakes, but if anything you can do to, avoid that by, doing some in-depth research, I highly recommend it. I also find, and I don't know if you found this with your book as well, that the research actually helped me with the plot. Sometimes you'll learn something fascinating or super interesting and you just want to use it in the plot. So it helps you both ways. Did you find that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it makes your writing stronger. You are learning as you're creating. So it goes back and forth. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the funnest parts of writing. And especially, you're talking to experts who, can offer all of their experience to you and maybe even pitch new concepts and ideas to you. And of course, you're incorporating it into your work. And that, oh man, that is so cool. I've got to say that's one of the most interesting things I've ever heard on this show.
Well, thank you kindly. And it's really fun too, is that, the experts get really involved and it's really neat. Now, these kidnap negotiators I talked about, there are about 30 of them in the world, they're actually technically called response consultants. But I knew that term just, wouldn't resonate and it wasn't sexy enough. And so I, worked really hard and I came up with the term, the freedom broker. And I'm so flattered because they kind of like that term. And, some of them are joking about being freedom brokers now. So I think that's really a nice compliment. And, instead of being called a response consultant.
Now you've modernized the term.
There you go. That's right. Trademark it. It's yours. Now, in your research, I'd have to imagine you were reading and learning about some really scary stuff. Did you end up with nightmares because of the things that you were learning about this process?
Not particularly, but it is emotionally impactful. I think what really hit me hard, there are 40,000 reported kidnappings a year. And that means every hour, 5 people are abducted. And so it's a very serious international growing problem. And terrorists are taking to kidnapping as a way of fundraising, for their organizations. And military and police in different third world countries that have been displaced and they have no jobs and no way to put food on the table. So they've turned to kidnapping as a way of making a living. And it's really sad because they don't even really want to do that, but it is basically one of their only options because of, you know, being displaced and having no job. And so these things are leading to kidnapping becoming a huge international concern. And I think we're going to see more and more about it in the news. And I think getting to know Peter Moore, the hostage I spoke about earlier, you know, Peter was in captivity 1,000 days, and, you know, he had a mock executions done to him. He, you know, had horrible, you know, horrific conditions. For 6 months, he was blindfolded and handcuffed, and the only way he got through the time was, you know, killing mosquitoes between his clasped hands and counting how many he could do a day. And, you know, when he was finally relieved of the blindfold, he was chained to a radiator, and he looked on the wall next to him, and there was all these cracks on the wall. And he designed a train system, and complete and utter train system in his mind that he was able to replicate later on paper. So these kind of things do leave, I think, echoes of the horrors of kidnapping. And I guess I sort of look at it as bringing attention to kidnapping is really important to me, to make people realize there are hostages out there who need to come home.
And on top of all of the stuff that they suffer from while they're in captivity, I mean, also, I think that a lot of it would lead to PTSD.
That's a huge side effect, absolutely. And interestingly, that some suffer greatly to the point where they literally can't work ever again. But some people seem to be very resilient, and they are able to go back to you know, their jobs. So it really depends, you know, on the person and the circumstances of their kidnapping, of course.
Now, you had mentioned before about safety measures that you learned along in the process of this to maybe not be a victim.
Mm. Yeah, I'd be delighted to talk a few safety tips. One of which is try to avoid traveling alone. You become a bit of a soft target when you're alone, especially as a woman. And if you are traveling alone, you should always talk about your colleagues that are back at the hotel, or your boyfriend or wife, or, you know, somebody that's there. And just to make sure that people think that there's someone else, you know, kind of watching out for you. And if you do go out, try to travel in groups, because you can imagine the kidnappers are looking for an easy catch, right? They want someone that's, you know, they'd be able to, you know, immobilize and get in the trunk, let's say, really quickly. And, you know, groups tend to dissuade them, whereas single people, like, are definitely more appealing. And if you're traveling internationally, especially to some of these hotspots, and I actually have a map on my website, kjhowe.com, that sort of spells out the entire globe and where the highest risks are for kidnapping. So if people are going to travel, you can take a quick look at that before you go. And don't dress, you know, wealthy. Try and leave all your jewelry at home. Even if you can, bring an old laptop or old cell phone. Maybe even have a dummy wallet. You know, have your own wallet somewhere tucked inside, and have your dummy wallet, the one you use, that's just sort of accessible. So if someone tries to rob you, you can give them the dummy one. And there's so many different ways to protect yourself, but make sure you give people at home a detailed itinerary of where you are and when, so that if you do go missing, they know where to start looking.
That's some excellent tips. And it almost makes you scared to travel at this point, because right now the political climate is terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would recommend, there's government travel advisories online. You can just Google the country you're going to go to, read them carefully, and really believe them, because they're very cautious about, you know, giving extreme measures about, you know, travel advisory, but they're really bang on, and they have people on the ground who know what's happening in these countries. I think, sadly, what happens to some people is they're a little overconfident and don't think anything's going to happen to them until it does, you know. And I think, you know, definitely, I'm an avid traveler, always have been, and I'm not going to stop traveling, but I think you just need to be very wise about it.
Like, let's say somebody is, you know, basically abducted, right? Is there anything that you can carry on your person? Like, I mean, a pocket knife, a taser, like, what one object or, you know, piece of hardware should a person take while traveling to protect themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, you know, probably the most powerful tool is like basically are your wits. Because if you can, you know, and let's say you're somewhere public and someone's trying to abduct you, you know, make noise, scream, run. Once they get you in the car or a taxi, for example, because I was going to make another, safety point is taxis are often used in third world countries as a way of kidnapping people. So if you are traveling abroad, try to take a private car that's recommended by your hotel with a driver they trust, because taxis have been used numerous times. And you can imagine how easy that would be. You get in a taxi, right, ready to go somewhere. All of a sudden the doors lock. You're in there in captivity already. But with respect to, like you said, the tools, I mean, you'd be very careful because weapons can be used against you. And unless you're an expert and know how to use those weapons, it could actually work to your disadvantage to have a knife on you,
Yeah.
The first thing kidnappers are going to do when they abduct you is to give you what they call a welcome battering. And the reason they do that is because they want to immediately establish dominance or control over you. And so, usually with men, they'll hit you hard and just pound you down so that you feel like you're immediately submissive, because they want a submissive hostage.
Hypothetical situation. You are abducted.
Mm-hmm.
You survive that beating first. That first beating, rather. What is the next step that you can take to protect yourself if you are abducted and then beaten? What can you do at that point what would you say would be the next step?
Sure. So what you're going to do is you're going to try to exercise every day. You're going to try and eat everything you can get your hands on because you want to stay strong. If there's an opportunity to escape, then you want to make sure you're strong enough to take it. One of my kidnap negotiators was just telling me this week, there were 4 college students who thought it would be smart to, go on a hunger strike when they were kidnapped to establish sort of solidarity. But 4 days later, they had an opportunity to escape and they were all too weak to run away. And so they had missed their chance. So keep yourself fit as you can. Keep your mind active you can do things like build a house in your mind or build a train system like Peter Moore did. You can also do mathematical problems, play word games, try to remember all your family's birth dates, just play games with yourself, keep your mind sharp. You can also try to establish some sort of rapport with your kidnappers. You never want to challenge them. You never want to look them directly in the eyes and make them feel threatened by you. Also, they may not want you to see what they look like, right? If they're going to negotiate and they don't want to be caught. So basically, you want to establish a rapport and have them see you as a human being with dignity. You can also start asking, for things like, toilet paper, pen and paper, things that you might need. And that starts establishing a rapport in a sense, because you always want to make sure that they see you as a human being, not as just like an object in the corner that they can beat.
I honestly feel like this could be life-saving advice. So thank you. That is incredibly kind of you to share all of that. And I hope that, audience will listen to that advice if they ever find themselves in that situation. But what I want to know is, with the Freedom Broker, now, is this more of the nitty-gritty, realistic approach to it? Like, is this like a XXX, like Vin Diesel explosions everywhere book? Or is this like you can learn something and save your life by reading this story?
To be honest with you, I think there's a lot of action in the story, and it like I said, it's very fast paced. But at the same time, I really tried to lace, and I mean weave throughout information about kidnapping, stats, and other things that can help people. A couple of my kidnap negotiators read the book for me because I wanted them to make sure I hadn't made any mistakes or any inaccuracies would be in it. And they said to me, I really like this book, and they're actually going to make all the new recruits that they have coming on read the book first. So it was really nice of them to say that.
Wow. Okay. All right. Well, that answers my question. It sounds like it's a nice balance of everything.
To add another layer to that, though, I think in any form of entertainment, be it movies like you had mentioned, the Vin Diesel, the XXX kind of movies, and books, you do have to kind of amp up the action a little, because you really want to entice your readers. You really want to give them something really interesting to latch on to.
Of course, it's entertainment, of course. Because you do, with these works, like you do, like you said, amp it up, exaggerate. You set up these situations, of course, that are larger than life, typically.
I agree. Listen, for example, kidnappings can last days, months, years, okay? And when you're writing a thriller novel, it's going to happen a lot faster than that. So you have to have some level of creative license, and I think anyone reading it understands that. You know, we are entertainers as writers, but I really felt like it was important to also be an educator, and I'm going to continue to do that. You know, like in my next book, Skyjack, for example, I've explored a lot about airplane safety, and you might find it interesting that the rear of the airplane is actually the most safe place to be if there's going to be an issue. And second to that is the middle or over their wings, and the least safe, you know, from a safety standpoint, with crashes and such, is the front. So so next time you're sent to the back of the bus, so to speak, you can at least smile and say, well, at least I'm safer.
That's funny. No, yeah. It's true though. I have a friend who writes airplane thrillers, and I read his first book and I said, man, I'm never getting on an airplane ever again after reading this. But he, as a pilot, is what he does in his day job. He put in a lot of that realistic stuff, like the details about the safest spots on the plane. And it's like, oh my goodness. Yeah. Back of the bus. Yeah. I'm happy to take that coach seat.
I was going to say first class isn't as attractive, is it?
No, not anymore.
And also, whenever you're going to sit in a plane, make sure if you can to sit at least 5 rows or closer to an exit. And wherever you're sitting, count how many seats it is for you to hold on to and touch before you get to an exit. Because if something happens, the plane could be completely dark and you need to be able to find your way. And so it's really important to have that kind of as a locator for yourself, a grounding point.
That's very good advice. Not to mention that too, but all the people you're going to have to trample over to get to that exit.
Yes, exactly. Always go for the aisle seat.
Makes it worth it to get hit by the drink cart as it goes by.
Oh my goodness. I know I've been having a lot of that because I've been, touring around the US, flying everywhere. And I know it just like, you get these bruised shoulders.
Wow.
Does your publisher do a lot of the media events for you and set you up with where to go and where to do talks?
Yeah, they sent me on a 17-day tour throughout the US, which was a lot of fun. I was able to meet so many nice people and connect with readers. It was a great experience, especially as a debut author. It's really hard to break in because people don't know your name and you're not a brand, so they have to really, get intrigued somehow. And hopefully, when you talk about kidnapping, they find it interesting and want to learn more.
Any funny stories on your travel that you'd like to share with us?
Wow. And endless ones, really. Because I'm a debut author, okay? No one would probably show up at the bookstore if it was just me alone. So we designed a tour where I was very lucky to be in conversation with certain authors. And I really couldn't imagine a nicer, launch on my actual launch day. I was in New York and Lee Child was kind enough to interview me. And so he, basically took time out of his busy schedule to go to the Mysterious Bookshop in New York and interview me. And it's actually on video online, if anyone's interested in hearing it. And I was teasing Lee because I said, do you have kidnap and ransom insurance? And he says, I don't have any insurance. And I'm like, well, you should think about it. And we had a good time. So it was great.
Oh, that's so cool. Wow, I like that. That's, wow.
I don't think Jack Reacher needs to worry too much, right? He's a pretty tough guy.
That's crazy, man.
I think he'd be giving the kidnappers a bit of a beating.
Just try it. Just try it. What is that United Airlines thing?
Yeah.
There's all these memes about like, what would happen if they tried to do like Chuck Norris,
So true.
The United thing really did just completely blow out of proportion, though.
Absolutely.
And the memes were hilarious.
Very much so.
I like how Southwest had one. We beat our competitors, not our customers.
Yes. That was great.
Or the guy from The Walking Dead, Negan, walking down the aisle. We need a few volunteers.
Yes. Oh, it's been a lot of fun.
Oh. Yeah, but the sad part of that situation is that it really was an unfortunate event. They handled it extremely poorly,
yes.
And they're suffering for it now.
Mm-hmm. It's sad, isn't it? Because it basically escalated. They needed a kidnap negotiator there to de-escalate the situation.
No kidding. Oh my God. And then what were they thinking? Like, did they think that by dragging this man off the airplane that no one was going to record it on their phone? Like,
I know.
oh,
In this day and age, yeah, come on.
oh, I couldn't believe that. That's so sad.
Well, and then a couple of days later, somebody on a United flight got stung by a scorpion too. It was like they just couldn't, get away from bad press.
I didn't hear that one. That's awful. Hope they're okay.
It was a flight. I think it came out of Texas. It was one of the Southwest area states, and their scorpions are kind of prevalent. And I guess it fell out of the overhead compartment and stung somebody.
Well, that would be a flight to remember.
Can't avoid the bad press.
No, gosh.
So with your book, I see here it's listed. You have it as an audiobook as well, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook right now, and then of course the trade paperback will be coming out later.
And who is your narrator for your audiobook?
The same guy that does James Patterson's work and Charlene Harris's, her True Blood. It's Therese Plummer.
Oh wow! Congratulations, that is so cool.
And he's got a great voice, like really powerful. It's great. I feel very grateful because it's so important, isn't it, to have the right narrator?
Absolutely. So how involved were you with the casting? Were you at all involved or invested in that, or?
Yeah, they gave me a few choices actually, and I listened to them, and he really stood out as the perfect one.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, because when I did my audiobook, I listened to about 30 auditions.
Wow.
And my wife and I, she's like my business partner. So we listened to them all, and I was like, oh wow, okay, this one, and this one, and then we narrowed it down from there to Joel Frimkin, who has been doing amazing work. Like he's just been getting out there like crazy. So that's pretty cool.
It's a real talent. It's such a different, set of skills. I have great admiration for people who have the patience to read an entire book out loud.
Oh, and to make it sound good.
Yeah, it takes a lot of energy.
Yeah, have you ever listened to the Harry Potter series on audiobook?
Yeah, fantastic.
Oh, Jim Dale is amazing.
Yeah.
That's one of the other big contrasts. We talk a lot about the different types of publishing out there. The traditional publishers, especially the big five, handle all of that legwork of organizing that publicity tour, about getting the hardcover, paperback, audiobook, all of that for you. Whereas the indie side, that legwork is all on you. So it's a good contrast to show our viewers and the aspiring authors out there, or even authors who may be considering going hybrid, what the other side looks like and what can be done. And I know a lot of times, a lot of indies feel like the traditional market doesn't do any publicity. But I mean, you're proof positive that they set up a media tour for you. They sent you out and around to get this book off the ground. So it's very much something that they still do, and they still help out their authors, their debut authors, to get a leg up on.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I feel very fortunate they were so behind me with the book. And, I was very lucky to get a 2-book deal as well. So, at least I knew I would have 2 books in this series, and hopefully, we'll get enough readers that I can continue writing, because I'm sure, fascinated by it. And there are so many endless kidnap scenarios and so many interesting locales to explore that I really feel that the series has endless potential that way.
Wonderful. Now, do you plan to go beyond 2 books, or 2 books was just the starting offer?
Oh yeah, that's what they offered. So I said, of course, yeah, that sounds great. And I'm hoping that my agent will negotiate more. So fingers crossed.
Now, speaking of publicity and marketing, they set you up to start with this, but you do have to do some of the legwork yourself. What do you do on your own as far as spreading the word about the books and getting out to readers?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It doesn't matter if you're indie published, traditionally published. I feel like you've really got to be committed to being your own, promotional efforts, because if you don't, it's really hard to cut through the noise. And 1 million books are published every year. And, being part of Thrillerfest, I see a lot of authors. And that, out of the debut author class, 2/3 of those authors will never write another book. And isn't that sad? because they obviously had the passion and the talent to get published for the first time. So that's why I think it's really important to invest, in whatever you can do promotionally. And I'm doing a lot of book clubs, sometimes by Skype, if I can't be there in person because it's, across the country. I'm talking to a lot of, media people that I have met through Thrillerfest, for example, telling them about the book. I work with a lovely, private publicist as well. I think it's really important if you're traditionally published to maybe take a very sizable amount of your advance on your first book and invest it back in yourself. You can, connect with readers on Goodreads, on BookBub, Kindle Daily Deals, things like that. So I think it's just really important to think about all the different aspects. And I'm really honored as well that we reached out to the American Diabetes Association, and the editor of their magazine kindly read The Freedom Broker and felt that the portrayal of diabetes was very accurate. So they featured it in their March magazine. So things like that, I think, can really go a long way, because I really wanted to show, people with diabetes, or any illness for that matter, that nothing has to stop you from reaching for your dreams.
That's such an empowering message. I like it. And all the advice, everything that you just said, it sounds like it's invaluable. So I think that people are really going to listen to all the different avenues that you just suggested.
Yeah, and keep in mind, at the International Thriller Writers, for anyone in that kind of genre, we're here, their whole mandate, it's a not-for-profit organization, and our whole mandate is to support thriller authors, actually. That's everything we want to do. And so, if you're able to come to the conference in July, it might be worth your time, because you can really connect with people, network. And I think that's the biggest part of it, really, is just asking other people for help. I've tried to help everyone I can in my job, new writers and mid-list writers, and even best-selling writers, and anything I can do. And I've been very, very fortunate to be, benefit from the advice and help of others.
And all of that, just reaching the community, can be very difficult. It can be very difficult to get your feet wet. Like when I started, and I'm still new. I'm still brand new to all of this. Like I had no friends. I had no resources. I was learning everything for the first time. So just the fact that that event exists, I would strongly encourage anyone anyone who can make it to go there, because I'm sure it will basically bypass a lot of those questions. Like it will help you answer those questions so much more quickly, than having to research it all online or just guess.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's really invaluable to network. I think when you ask for advice, I think the most important thing is to network in your field of interest. People are so kind, really. They want to help each other, and I think the writing community is a very generous one. So just ask people for advice and help. And, we always want to see the next people come up and to be debuts and kind of celebrate their success.
And it's crazy because, just from what my experience is, my short experience with the writing community, everybody is really open and welcoming and friendly. And we are and are not in competition with each other. Like no one is going to write the same book as each other. You know what I mean? So it's awesome that we can all help each other and feel good about it. I know I'm not trying to sound shallow, but you can help each other and feel great about it.
I couldn't agree more. The bottom line is we have a lot of voracious readers out there, and I'm writing a book a year. People can read my book in a day. There's and so we could have tons more books out there, and I encourage people to follow their dreams and get their book out there.
Definitely. Great message. Thank you so much.
That's a great way for us to kind of wind down the show on that message of just help and support and networking with your fellow author. And it's very true. The indie community, the traditional publishing community, everybody that's in this writer community, at least that I've met, has been supportive, has been welcoming, has been willing to share information. And it's really nice.
Yeah, and if anyone has any specific questions, on thrillerfest.com, my email is up on that homepage, so don't hesitate to reach out to me.
And again, we will make sure that all of those links are at the bottom of the show here so that people can find them. And since we're at the end of our hour, Is there anything else that you would like to tell our audience? Do you have any events planned, any signings? Are you still on tour for your new release?
Well, I'm actually going to be going down to Austin, Texas at I think May 6th for a couple of events. So if anyone's interested, they can drop me a line. I can let them know. And I'll obviously be at Thrillerfest since I'm the executive director. And I'll also be at BoucherCon, which is a huge mystery and suspense conference in Toronto this year in my hometown. And that's in, I think, September.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us and talking about your new release and telling us some important safety tips. I think it's going to be a really interesting show for our audience. And you've provided us with a really good perspective to contrast the indie versus traditional side. So thank you very much for that.
It's been a real pleasure. You guys are great. And thanks a lot for having me on. I really appreciate it.
David, anything else to add for us?
I want a book. It sounds awesome, and I feel like I'm going to learn a lot from reading it. And I can tell just how much effort you put into the research aspect of it. So
I really hope you enjoy it. Please drop me a line when you're finished. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Oh, definitely. Thank you so much.
All right, guys, that's it for this week's episode of Spilling Ink. We'll be back next week with new authors to introduce you to and more talking points on the publishing industry. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.